record on this computer. Share screen now. And there we go. So here we are. So the woes continue right through to the end of chapter 33 before a new future described in 34 to 35. Now, some people regard this 28 to 35 as a new section, but there have been prophecies of woes and promises of bright future in the earlier chapters. And I'll mention this later on, but maybe I'll do it now before we scroll down or before I scroll up. Some people would place these chapters in the short time period of 705 to 702 in the reign of Hezekiah, but others place it in the reign of Josiah. Some others even go back to Ahaz, which means, again, we don't know when it refers to. We're going to look in a moment at the word commentary history sheets, which apply to the later year ones, and it gives it one possibility. But one of the things I thought it came to me that I ought to have stressed again is Isaiah prophesied over 60 years. Just think about that. Now, all right, I believe we're all over 60, but think about our adult years. You could argue that think of us prophesying over all our adult years. That's the sort of prophetic lifespan of Isaiah's ministry. So he would have, we've got all these scriptures and prophecies put together in a block. But remember this, that these would not have come off like that. I reckon there might have been years between each prophecy. And then as we get closer to critical events, maybe a number of those prophecies happened in a block. But to us, it seems it's going through the same stuff again and again. But Isaiah had been called to bring them generation after generation. If you're prophesying over 60-year time period, you're not just prophesying to one generation of leaders, you're dealing with a multiple generation of leaders who maybe haven't heard or listened to the earlier stuff. And so that has to, a fresh presentation comes where there's much of the same message. Trust in the Lord. Turn to the Lord. Don't seek alliances with other people against Assyria, because Assyria is God's instrument to punish Israel, and a lot of that punishment may well have happened by the time of some of these prophecies. And for Judah to learn, even though some of Judah will have been punished, Jerusalem stood and stood and stood until it finally fell many years later under Babylonian rule. But in that time, the village people were suffering and the land was suffering. And so what you have to do is realise, hey, he's repeating himself. Yeah, maybe he is in part. Maybe he's giving more detail in part. But maybe he's talking to another generation. Or maybe he's talking to the leaders again who haven't listened in the past, and maybe in the current situation, maybe they will listen. Well, if he listened to the Lord, his job was to keep prophesying, even though they're not going to listen to him by and large. But that was his role. And again, it's a reminder to us, isn't it? Our job is to testify about Jesus, to live for Jesus. People's response are people's responses, and that's their right. And it's not based on whether we get the desired result. It's based on whether we are faithful in doing and saying what God wants us to do and say. So I just thought that may be useful for you who, like me, have been reading a similar message. Don't trust in Egypt. Don't have these alliances with Egypt. You can't rely on them. Don't involve yourself in all this politics. Accept the fact that Assyria is going to rule for the length of time that God has decreed. And he will punish Israel and part of Judah as part of God's plan to refine it. And he will punish other nations for their rebellion, arrogance, and sin. And ultimately, he's going to do the same with Assyria, because they have not seen that it's Yahweh that gave them their wonderful reigns and authority. And it's Yahweh who will bring them down and start a new kingdom under Babylon. So, having said that, let's look at a little bit of history. And this is from the Word Bible Commentary. It's not mine. It's the Word Bible Commentary. And at 660 BC, Psamtik I, who reigned in Egypt from 663 to 609, that's 54 years of reign. And a guy who has a lot of reigning at that stage is there, and he controls all of Egypt by 640. It took around about 20 years of activity before he finally got control of the whole of Egypt. Because remember, Egypt tended to be a scattered lot, and there were city-states, and they were wrestling for control of Egypt. But Psamtik finally made it for a while, and across in Judah, we've passed beyond Hezekiah, and we're into the reign of Manasseh, who reigned from 697 to 642. And Amon, his son, followed that before he was assassinated. And finally, Josiah, at the ripe old age of 6 or 8, I think, he started his reign of 31 years. His reign was very good at the start, while he was under the mentoring of a wise and wonderful godly ruler. But after that mentor failed, I think he died. His people who advised him were poorer, and he ran into trouble. And across in Syria, Assurbanipal, who went from 633 to 669, he was ruling, and he also ruled Babylon, because Assyria had control of Babylon, and he re-established the rule, because remember, Merodach Baladan was one who caused a lot of trouble. He set up his son Nabopolassar, and he ruled from 605 to 663, until the Assyrians were defeated at the gates of Babylon in 626. And over. Can you get that, please, Julie? the Scythians drive to the border of Egypt. Now, according to Word, Isaiah 6:20 is Isaiah 28 to 29, and pretty much around Isaiah 30 to 33. This is, I need to bring this down a bit, because that Isaiah 30 to 33 should be level with Nico. So I had a bit of trouble with the adjusting things there. Whoops, what's happened? What's happened? What have I done? Okay. And Nico, 593 to 609, marches through Judah around 609, and he end up kills Josiah, because Josiah tries to take him on, because this, remember, this is down level here. And after that, in 609, Jehoiakim rules from that time, and that's under Egypt. So Egypt rules west of the Euphrates from 604 to 609, and Necho is defeated at Karashmeth and withdraws from Palestine in 605, and he withstands a Babylonian invasion, and he holds his borders against Babylonian thrust, because it was in the Babylonian ascendancy at this stage. Okay, well, over on in the Assyria, this should be up a bit higher. He takes Nineveh falls. Nineveh falls in 612. Haran falls in 610, and Assyria is then, as you've got Babylon ruling east of the Euphrates, Egypt ruling west of the Euphrates, until Nebuchadnezzar re-establishes in his rule of 562 to 605, controls Palestine to the river of Egypt, but he still hasn't taken over control there. And Jehoiakim tests Babylon's rule in 598 and doesn't do very well. Nebuchadnezzar lays siege to Jerusalem, deports leaders to Babylon, and puts Zedekiah in, a rather weak Babylonian vessel. And of course, there's a Judean result. Sarmatic II and Apres, that's Hophra, they're ruling from Egypt. But Nebuchadnezzar puts down Judean revolt, and he backs off, and destruction of Jerusalem and deportation begins. So there's some of the history, which this word commentary believes that Isaiah 28 to 29 is this 620, and 30 to 33 is around the 610 section following. So that gives you some idea of the history. Are there any questions before I continue on into Isaiah 28? Remember, this is one idea of when 28 to, where is it? 28 to 29 is occurring, but it could be occurring a lot earlier. What you have is you've got Israel's fading splendor because of pride, sin, disobedience, and a refusal to heed the prophets. And this is the cause for further judgment, probably from Assyria. And it's another woe. It's like a requiem type of thing to the haughty crown of Ephraim's drunkards. to the fading, drooping flower. Aren't these interesting pictures? Like in our garden, there's numbers of you are gardeners, fading, drooping flower of its proud splendour. You see these beautiful blooms, and then they kind of fade and they kind of droop, and they're deadheads. Sited at the head of a lush valley. It's not wrong with the valley. The problems are because of Ephraim's stupid behaviour. To those prostrated by wine, the picture is, instead of turning to the Lord, eat, drink and be merry, till tomorrow we die, was the attitude. See, a strong and mighty man in the Lord's service, like a storm of hail. Think of a storm, a destroying tempest, immense flood waters overflowing. And they would have seen some of these things, like overflowing rivers and so on. The Jordan, with his hand, he throws them to the ground. They'll be trampled underfoot. The haughty crown of Ephraim's drunkards and the faded, drooping flower of its proud splendour, sited at the head of a lush valley. Like a ripe fig before summer comes, whoever spots it forthwith picks and swallows it. And some of this would have already happened by the time of this prophecy, but some of it is a reminder for the others who are left behind. And we see here, even the remnant of Israel is beyond restoration, and the leaders have been rendered useless. That day, Yahweh Sebaoth will be a crown of splendour and a proud diadem for the remnant of his people. A spirit of judgment for him who sits in judgment, and the strength of those who repel assault on the gate. What he's saying is, if you want good judgment, it's Yahweh Sebaoth is the one you turn to. Do you want strength to repel an assault at the gate? Yahweh is your strength. Not alliance with Egypt, not strategies to rebel against Syria, none of that. These two, that's the remnant of the people, have been confused by wine, have gone astray owing to liquor. So even the remnant are still no good. Priest and prophet have been confused by liquor, are sodden with wine, have strayed owing to liquor, have been confused in their visions, strayed in their decision. Every table's covered with filthy vomit. No one is clean. Some of this, of course, is pictorial of people who are living godless lives, and priests and prophets should have been doing better. But they've got false priests. Well, they're priests, but they're behaving falsely, and prophets, and they will prophesy anything, like you prophesy good stuff, yes. And the level of instruction of these drunk teachers is foolish, incomprehensible speech, like a drunken that will be used by God to promise the foreign language of the sent invaders. So what he's saying is that they're so drunk and just totally out of it. They're not even speaking properly. And know what I'm going to do, says the Lord? I'm going to send someone who's got a foreign language, and he won't be able to make sense to you because he won't speak your language. It will be, but Paul will actually apply this as a judgment sign in counselling not to have excessive tongue speaking in church to drive away unsaved visitors. He was talking about a judgment sign, and he was saying, okay, you're making no, because of your life, you're making no proper communication to people, and it's going to get worse because you're going to have to listen to the words of people who speak the wrong language that most of you are not going to understand. And that's a sign of judgment. And Paul was saying that if we're speaking in tongues all the time in church and an unbeliever comes in, he's going to think we're a bunch of crazies. And whereas if he comes and there's a word of knowledge and a prophetic word that speaks to his or her heart, then they're convicted, and this is good. And Paul was saying, don't overdo speaking in tongues in church, but when you have unsaved people in the gathering. Whom does he think, going back to whom does he think he's lecturing? Whom does he think the message is for? Babies just weaned? Babies just taken from the breast? Can you think of a baby who's just, well, maybe one or two by that stage, depends on when they weaned him. But with this salve la salve, carve love, these are, I think, are the Hebrew letters that they translated do, and whatever. Remember, this is a New Jerusalem Bible, so they're trying to get the picture. And they're just letters and words. They don't make sense. Now with stammering lips, like a drunken person, and in a foreign language, you'll talk to this nation. He used to say to them, here, you can rest. Here, you can let the weary rest. Here, all is quiet if you just turn to me. But they refused to listen. So Yahweh's going to say this to them. Sav la sav, kav la kav, zia sham. So that when they walk, they will fall over backwards and so be broken, trapped and taken captive. Wow. Judgment now turns the leaders and the people of Jerusalem. All right, it's talking about Israel, but really this is about Jerusalem there, because that's the last to fall, and they're the ones that need to get the message, at least to stop the rot. Hence, listen to Yahweh's word, you insolent men, you scoffers, you rulers, rulers who are parable speakers of this people in Jerusalem. So it's talking about their attitude to God, and they don't make sense. Because you said, we have made a treaty with death and struck a pact with Sheol. And this is a bit of mockery or sarcasm, perhaps, in terms of some of the Egyptian gods were, one of them I think was called Death. And so what it's talking about is you've made this treaty with Egypt, but it's when the scourging flood comes over, it will not touch us. That's what they're saying. For we have made lies our refuge and hidden under falsehood. Well, that's not what they thought quite when they made a treaty with Egypt. Yahweh's alternative is both a promise of Messiah, but a promise of utter devastation of Jerusalem. So the Lord Yahweh says this, now I shall lay, I put shall because different translators translate this as future or even past. But really, this picture is also referring to Messiah. It's definitely quoted of Jesus in the New Testament. I lay a stone in Zion, a granite stone, a precious cornerstone, a firm foundation stone. Wow, he's like granite. You're not going to shift Jesus. He's a precious cornerstone, a firm foundation stone. Whatever's built on him is secure. No one who builds on him or relies on this will stumble or be offended. And I will make fair judgment, the measure and uprightness, the plumb line. But for you lot who trusting in Egypt, and hail will sweep away your refuge of lies, and floods wash away the hiding place. Your treaty with death will be broken, your pact with Sheol will not hold. And when the scourging flood comes over, you will be trodden down by it. Got it? The scourging flood is a surge of Assyrian armies. And maybe Babylonian armies, and you're going to be trodden down by it. And every time it comes over, by the way, there's going to be ones from Assyria, and there's going to be ones from Babylon. It will seize on you, for it will come over morning after morning, day after day, and night by night. Nothing but fear will make you understand what you hear. Wow. And so you're going to learn fear, because I'm going to bring this upon you, Yahweh says. For what they have planned is woefully inadequate, as in the bed and blanket pictures. For the bed is too short to stretch in, and the blanket too narrow for covering. You know, like if you've got a very, very, very thin, abnormal blanket, it can't sort of come over you, and it can't tuck in around you to give you the warmth. That sort of, it's not quite right. Or it's like a bed where your feet sort of like that, and your feet sort of have to sort of go like that, and because it's too short. And what he's saying is, basically, what you've planned is totally inadequate. And remember, in the past, Yahweh miraculously gave Israel victory, but now Israel is going to miraculously give Assyria and Babylon victory in their time. Yes, as on Mount Perazim, Yahweh will rise, as in the valley of Gibeon, referring to past times where Yahweh gave the victory. He will storm to do his work, his mysterious work, to do his deed, his extraordinary deed. And that extraordinary deed is to send a foreign power to overwhelm the nation of Israel and Judah because of their sin. Stop scoffing, he's saying to the leaders in Jerusalem to whom this is directed. Then, or your bonds will be tightened further. It's going to be tough. But did you know, Yahweh says it's going to get even tougher if you don't pull your head in and stop scoffing. For I have heard it. It has been irrevocably decided as regards the whole country, Israel and Judah, by Lord Yahweh Sabaoth. Listen closely to my words. Be attentive. Understand what I'm saying. And he starts giving them some agricultural pictures. Does the ploughman plough all day to sow, breaking up and harrowing his ground? No. He only ploughs until it's ready for planting. Once he's leveled the surface, does he not scatter fennel and sow cumin? Yes, different types of seeds, different types of planting. You don't keep on doing the same thing all the time because you have to do what's appropriate in a process if you're going to get a harvest. And what he's saying to them, you've got a pattern of learning to look after to form alliances and go through rebellions and not following the prophetic words, and you need to change your way. And he gives them a word picture to try and communicate in ways they will understand. Then he puts in the wheat, millet, barley, and round the edges spelt. Because God has taught him this rule and instructed him. And what was believed in that day was that God, as a godly farmer, looked to God for guidance in what to do and how to do it, that God would give him wisdom. And they point out fennel must not be crushed with a sledge, nor do you cart wheels driven over Cummin. Some things you need to, because some seeds need a lot of heavier crunching for them to be opened up to grow the new seed out. But other ones, if you are too hard, you'll crush them and ruin them. Fennel must be beaten with a stick and cummin with a flail. When you are threshing wheat, you don't waste time crushing it. You get the horse and cartwheel moving, but you do not grind it fine. All this revelation is a gift from Yahweh Sevaos. Marvelous advice leaving for great achievements. You need to follow the advice of the Lord, not just keep on ploughing, following the same pattern. You need to learn. And that's excellent advice. Don't keep on doing the same thing. Even if you need to do it at the right time, you don't keep doing it. And verses 25, 27, 28 are saying, know what's appropriate for each situation and know how far to go. Hey, that's good advice to us. Praying is good, but there's a time for trusting and letting it go with God. There's a time for praising and rejoicing in the victory that you believe in your heart. There's a time for fasting, but there's a time to stop fasting. We need to know what's appropriate for each situation, how far to go. How do we know? We turn to Yahweh, we turn to the Lord, and we look to him to advise us by his Spirit. A new woe that spells disaster for Ariel, Jerusalem's policy, as Yahweh promises to besiege Jerusalem. Yah. So this is further along the way. Does anybody have something they'd like to share of a devotional nature from chapter 28? If so, can you speak up? And I will pause. Okay, all right, well, let's go on, because we have another woe passage. And woes are part of this, like at a funeral or a requiem. There's all kinds of interpretations of Ariel. Victor, beloved, valiant one, but I think it's a picture of Jerusalem. Woe, Ariel, Ariel, city where David encamped. Last year after year passed. Let year after year pass. Let the feast make their full round. Keep going through the patterns of life, because Israel was based, there were the feasts of Israel. They were annual, and what they're saying, let these continue on. Then I shall inflict trouble on you, and there will be sighing and sobbing, and I'll make it truly, and I shall make it truly, Ariel. I shall encamp around you. I shall lay siege to you, and mount siege works against you. It's not good enough that the Assyrians are going to do it, and the Babylonians will finally do it effectively. I mean, the Assyrians did try. but I'm going to be there, says Yahweh. And if I'm laying siege to you, guess what? You are going to fall. You will be laid low. Will speak from the underworld. Your words rise like a murmur from the dust. Your voice from the earth will be like a ghost. It will whisper as though coming from the dust because you're dead. The horde of your enemies will be like fine dust. Yep, the Assyrian horde and the Babylonian horde, the horde of warriors like flying chaff. And suddenly, in an instant, you will be visited by Yahweh Sabaoth with thunder, earthquake, mighty din, hurricane, tempest, flame, devouring fire. Not just the problems of the earthly, you're going to have Yahweh in there fighting against you. It will be like a dream, yeah, a bad dream, and a vision at night, a terrifying vision. The horde of all the nations at war with Ariel, all those fighting, besieging, and troubling it. Because remember what happens in those days as Assyria, then Babylon took over the army, took over people. He recruited the fighters of the people they took over for their army. So you had an army which was a mixture of all kinds of nations. It will be like a dream of a hungry man. He eats and he wakes up with an empty belly. Yeah, okay, you have a dream, but it doesn't change. Your dreams won't change the reality I'm going to bring. The dream of a thirsty man, he drinks, wakes up exhausted with a parched throat. So it'll be with all the hordes of the nations walking, making war on Mount Zion. If you get a dream that you think, oh, this dream's going to be just so marvelous. We'll be rescued by Yahweh wonderfully. Well, you won't. You're going to wake up just as bad as you were beforehand, pal, because you have not trusted me. Not only will Jerusalem be surrounded by hordes of attackers, they got Yahweh using miracles against them too on top of that. And on top of that, he will send a stupor upon them and their incompetent, derelict leaders. It's bad enough that they got outside these great hordes of armies. They got Yahweh miraculously enabling them to bring down Jerusalem. Inside, basically, he's going to send stupor upon the stupid. Be stupefied and stunned. Go blind. Whoops. Unseen, drunk but not on wine, staggering but not through liquor, which had been an enormous problem, for Yahweh has infused you with a spirit of lethargy or deep sleep. He has closed your eyes. The prophets ain't prophesying, they got nothing. He has veiled their heads, your heads, the seers, they're not getting any visions because Yahweh has closed them down. For to you, every vision has become words of a sealed book. Even you get a vision, you won't understand it. And you give it to someone to read and say, read that. He said, I can't because it's sealed. And some of the prophecies of Isaiah would be like a sealed book to them. Then you give a book to somebody who can't read and you say, how stupid is it? You give it to somebody who can read and he says, I can't because it's sealed. And you give it to somebody who can't read and he said, I can't. Well, yeah, that's the kind of stupidity. And the Lord said, because this people approaches me, oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. This people approaches me only in words. You know, they've learned the religious bit. They've learned what to say. They have the most pious, godly words on their lips. But when they approach, it's only the lips that approach, not the heart. They honour me only with lip service while their hearts are far from me. What a situation. And reverence for me, as far as they're concerned, is nothing but a human commandment, a lesson memorised, so they're acting it out, not from their heart. And one of the things they need to know, and we always need to be reminded, is the heart is the issue. As a person thinks in their heart or their mind, if you will, so they are. It's the heart that God looks upon, not just the words. I mean, the words are good when they match the heart. Very well, I shall have to go on astounding this people with prodigies and wonders, so they'll be reminded of my holiness and greatness, because they just seem to have lost it. For the wisdom of its wise men is doomed, because it isn't real wisdom anymore. The understanding or discernment, any who understand and discern, it will vanish. It's going down the plug hole like that drooping flower. Woe to wicked, scoffing schemers who foolishly try to hide their evil acts and have no respect for Yahweh. And in a reversal of first and last as last, and last as first, you get joy to the meek and lowly who will encounter and exalt in Yahweh. So regardless of the situation we find ourselves in, if we can be meek and humble, and we can reach out and exalt in Yahweh, we will have joy regardless of the situation, whether it be COVID, whether it be time in jail for those who won't actually be silenced by the people who try and cut the Bible down. You know, like, I don't like what they say about one group of people, because God says that's sin, and so if we speak about that, they'll say, you know, we are nasty people who are violent and horrible and unfit parents, all kinds of other stuff. So you better shut up while we push our line, which is anti-God, anti-righteousness. And so some of the faithful who speak up, they're going to suffer unless these laws that are being promulgated in Victoria at the moment, and are already in other states, perhaps not as tough and hard and miserable as what we got. If I'm told that, I haven't read the ones in other states. But regardless of where we end up, remember we have the example of Paul and Silas, and I'm hoping they don't put us in stocks and beat us with rods, even though some of the stuff that goes on in prisons is not very nice. And but I suppose what we have to do is we have to be faithful to God without being arrogant and insensitive, because people who are trapped in sin are victims of the enemy's activities. They're not necessarily bad people. They're people with bad habits who need to draw from the Lord. Another woe. Look at this.
Graham.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'll pause for a moment. We're going into some feedback. If you just hang on 2 seconds, and I'll, where are we? I'll stop share. I'll pause and sharing screen. And we're back. Woe to those who burrow down Isn't that an interesting picture? There's some wonderful word pictures in Isaiah. Burrowing down, like a sort of an animal burrowing down to conceal their plans from Yahweh. Well, is that going to work? Nah. Who scheme in the dark and say, who can see us? Who knows who we are? How perverse and stupid you are. Is the potter no better than the clay? Something that was made can it say to its maker, he didn't make me? Or the pot say of the potter, he doesn't know his job. So how stupid is it and perverse and twisted to figure you can do stuff and God doesn't know? Isn't it not true that in a very short time, the Lebanon will become productive ground and Carmel will be reckoned for a forest? That day, the deaf will hear the words of the book, and delivered from shadow and darkness, the eyes of the blind will see. The meek and lowly will find ever more joy in Yahweh, and the poorest of the people will delight in the Holy One of Israel. Isn't that sad and great? Sad that you have to be poor and lowly, because if you're the top of the tree, it's harder for you to hear. You know, it's something like, you know, the rich man finding it harder to get into the kingdom than a camel getting through that eye of the needle. For the tyrant will be no more, the scoffer has vanished, and all on those on the lookout for evil have been destroyed. Those who incriminate others by their words, who lay traps for the arbitrator at the gate, the elders at the gate, you know, the judgment place, and groundlessly deprive the upright of fair judgment, they're going to be written off. And Yahweh's mercy and grace towards Israel will occur. And after the return of the children of Israel, Jacob Israel will truly see, I'm going to put a comma there, and I'll put a comma there. And after the return of the children of Israel, Jacob Israel will truly see Yahweh. This is why Yahweh, God of the house of Jacob, Abraham's Redeemer, says this: no longer shall Jacob be disappointed. No longer shall his face grow pale. Like, you know, like, ugh. And why does it grow pale? Because of fear down in the stomach region, the fluids go down there and leave the face pale. For when he sees his children, my creatures, home again with him, home again, because they've been kicked down into exile. He will acknowledge my name is holy. He will acknowledge the Holy One of Jacob to be holy, and will hold the God of Israel in awe. Even erring spirits will learn to understand, and murmurers accept instruction. There's going to be a restoration when the return of Israel. I believe that's something that's even yet future. Now we bring to another woe because of continuation of the pattern of seeking alliances rather than trusting Yahweh. So woe to those who seek protection through an alliance with Egypt. Judah and Jerusalem are going to find Egypt a disappointment. Full stop. So we start another woe. Woe to the rebellious children, declares Yahweh, who make plans which don't come from me, and make alliances not inspired by me, and so, or because of that, add sin to sin. So what's it saying? And we really know that I believe when we're making plans, we seek to follow the Lord's ways, and we need plans from him. If we're going to make alliances or business or whatever, we need them to be inspired by him. And he says of them back then, they're leaving for Egypt without consulting me, to take refuge in Pharaoh's protection, to shelter in Egypt's shadow. And he says, look, Pharaoh's protection is going to be your shame, and it's going to be confounding. For his princes, that's the Pharaoh, have gone to Zoan, that's up north, and his messengers reached Hans, I'm not sure where that is. Everyone has been disappointed by a people who cannot help. Because you see, it wasn't just Judah and what was left of Israel who were trusting in Egypt. There were others like the Palestinians and the Phoenicians and the Edomites and maybe even the Babylonians at this stage. And they were disappointed.
What does he mean?
They bring neither aid
No, there was never a country called Palestine.
nor profit,
Right.
only disappointment and confusion.
There was even.
Do we need to pause? Okay.
We need to mute.
Pardon?
We need to mute.
Oh, okay, right. Proclamation or burden about the beasts of the Negev. And this is a kind of another burden proclamation. And it's Yahweh being concerned for the beasts of the Negev, the beasts of burden which actually carry the Egypt's trade into the land of distress and of anguish, of lioness and roaring lion, of viper and flying dragon. They bear their riches on donkeys' backs and their treasures on camels' humps to Egypt, a nation that cannot help. What's its name? Egypt, whose help is vain and futile. So I call her Rahab the collapsed, or if you like, roaring, sitting still, which is another way of saying she makes aggressive noise, Egypt, but it's no good on action. It's like a roaring lion who's just sitting still. And so, all talk and no action. So now go and inscribe on a tablet, write it on a scroll, so that may serve for a time to forever, that this Egypt trusting will fail time and time again. You'll do it, and time again it will not work. And it points out that this people of Jerusalem are a rebellious people, lying children, people who don't listen to Yahweh's laws. You know what they say to their seers? Don't see anything. To the prophets, they say, don't prophesy the truth to us. You tell us flattering things, have illusory visions of grandeur and might and victory. Don't tell us. Wow. Because we want advice about turning aside from the way, to leave the path, to rid us of the Holy One of Israel. You've got to be joking. How stupid is that? So you know what the Holy One of Israel says? He says, since you have rejected this word and put your trust in fraud, oppression, or a tyrant, and disloyalty to Assyria, because all this stuff about Egypt in the time of Assyria and the time of Babylonian ascendancy, it's all about rebellion against the ones who Yahweh has sent for judgment. And rely on these, for this guilt will prove a breach opening up, a bulge at the top of the wall, which suddenly and all at once comes crashing down. He will shatter it like an earthenware pot, ruthlessly. This is Yahweh, ruthlessly knocking it to pieces, so that of the fragment, not one shard can be found with which to take up fire from the hearth or scoop water out of the storage well. It's saying the pieces are going to be so utterly shattered, nothing useful will be left after the disaster Yahweh will send, because you have turned from me, you have been rebellious, you've lied, you've not listened to the law, and not only that, you've muzzled the prophets, and you have conned yourself that you can rid yourself of the Holy One of Israel, when the Holy One of Israel is the only one who could save you. Because Yahweh had been calling for a passive role in international politics, because Assyria and then Babylon's rise as major players is part of Yahweh's plan of judgment on Israel and Judah, and on the surrounding smaller nations, and on Egypt, and instill Jerusalem's leaders, like Israel before them, will seek to ally with Egypt, and like with Israel it will fail, with Judah it will fail, and with Jerusalem it will fail. Okay, does anybody want to say anything? I'm going to stop share for the moment. I'm going to pause recording because I can hear voices, and I just want to, where are we? Where's the recording? I'm going to pause recording and I'll share the screen. And this is what the Sovereign Lord, the Holy One of Israel, says. Only in returning to me, I've got two different translations, verse 15, to highlight what verse 15 is really saying. He's saying, only in returning to me and resting in me, you'll be saved. No more politicking, and return to me, and in quietness, that is, you don't keep doing all this political maneuvering, and confidence, that's trust. And this is where your strength is, but you would have none of it. And the other translation says your salvation lay in conversion in the sense of turning around and returning, and tranquility, resting, your strength in serenity and trust, and you would have none of it. So it's all about turning back to the Lord, resting in his will, trusting in him as the strength. And the sad thing is they would have none of it. And they said, no, we will flee on horses. And Yahweh says, and flee you will. And again, they say, we shall ride on swift ones. And Yahweh says, and so your pursuers will be swift. 1,000 of you will quake at the threat of one. And when 5 threatens, you will flee until what is left of you will be like a flagstaff on a mountaintop, like a signal on a hill, so like a pole. It's not even, I don't think there's any flag on there on the hill. But Yahweh is waiting to be gracious to you. Why is he waiting? Because he's waiting for the right response. The exalted one, Yahweh, to take pity on you. For Yahweh is a God of fair judgment, and blessed are all those who hope in him. And he's waiting for those who will hope in him. That's what he's waiting for. He's waiting for those who hope in him. And until he gets it, there's going to be an awful lot of judgment and refinement. Yes, people of Zion living in Jerusalem, you will weep no more. Then he will be gracious to you when your cry for help rings out. He's looking for that cry for help ringing out. As soon as he hears it, he will answer. And here we've got, at the start of this, we've got two different ways to translate it. We can translate it as when the Lord has given you the bread of suffering and the water of affliction, or although the Lord has given you the bread of suffering and the water of affliction, which was really prisoner food. Okay, in other words, when you've gone through this time of exile, the time of distress, where your teachers are hidden and you're not getting decent teaching, you're not getting vision, and that when you've gone through this time of adversity that I am promising, he who is your teacher will no longer hide, and you will see your teacher with your own eyes, and your ears will hear these words behind you, like a shepherd who speaks from behind, keeping his sheep on the path. This is a different type of shepherd. He's not leading. Sometimes they lead from behind, speaking and keeping his sheep on the path. This is the way, keep to it. When you turn to the right or left, keep, straight. In other words, God will be like a shepherd guiding you. You'll hear that. You will hold unclean or you will hold unclean, or you will defile the silver plating of your idols and the gold plating of your images. You will throw them away like the polluted things are, shouting after them, good riddance, or filth. This is repentance by renouncing idolatrous ways. And he will send rain for the seed you sow in the ground, and the bread that the ground provides will be rich and nourishing. That day your cattle will graze in wide or extended pastures. This is a promise of future after you have learnt, after you turn to the Lord, after you cry out in your distress, after you have been judged and punished. Oxen and donkeys that work the land will eat fodder, wild sorrel, if you like. It's top quality stuff. They're eating really good quality stuff because, there's just so much going. Spread by the shovel load and the fork load, not just little bits here and there. There's so much going around. On the lofty mountain, on every high hill will be streams of water course. But it's also on the day of great slaughter when the strongholds fall, the slaughter of enemies in the midst of great restoration and blessing. Then moonlight will be bright as sunlight, and sunlight will be 7 times brighter. This is a word picture because, you wouldn't really want sunlight 7 times brighter, would you? Because we would burn. But the picture is that there's going to be absolute ideal conditions for growth. And Yahweh on that day, Yahweh dresses his people's wounds and heals the scars of the blows they received. He gave the blows. He might have used Assyria and Babylon and other people over the years, but there will come a day of restoration. There will come a day of healing of wounds and scars, because Yahweh has a future, a great, wonderful future for his people of Israel and Judah. Yahweh's judgment is again coupled with songs of joy at pilgrimage to worship. In describing Yahweh acting, we have some amazing word pictures here. See, the name of Yahweh comes afar. It's like somebody blazing his anger. Whew. And actually, one way of translating the next clause is his liver raging, or heavy his threat. And you're going from blazing anger, raging liver, lips brimming over with fury, his tongue like a devouring fire. His breath is like a river in spate or overflowing stream coming right up to the neck of people. It's a huge overflow to sift the nations with the sieve of destruction, to harness the peoples in a bridle that will lead them astray. Oh, what a picture of Yahweh in full blazing anger and fire. And your song will be like that. The people of Israel, when they see Yahweh acting against those who've given them trouble, will be like that on a festal night, where there'll be joy, a night of feast, the feast of Israel. And there'll be joy in your hearts, as when the sound of the flute, people make a pilgrimage to the mountain of Yahweh, to the rock of Israel. And you've got those psalms of ascents coming up to Israel to rejoice in pilgrimage. Yes. And Yahweh will make his majestic voice ring out. He will show the weight of his harm in the heat of his anger, with a devouring fire, with thunderbolt, downpour and hailstones. Yes, at Yahweh's voice, Assyria will be terrified. This is Assyria experience. He will strike him with his rod. Each time he goes by will fall the punishing rod. Yahweh will lay upon him. And at the sound in Israel, when that happens, you'll have the sound of tambourines and harps. In battles, he will wage against him, that's Assyria, with uplifting hand. Yes, Topheth has already prepared for a long time now for all the dead of Assyria, which are going into that. That too is ready for the king of Assyria, deep and wide, with his pyre, wood in plenty, Yahweh's breath, like a stream of brimstone, like a dragon, will set fire to it. Wow, wow, wow. And then we move to disaster from false faith in Egypt's strategy, and a reminder that Syria will fall to Yahweh's long-term plan. Woe to those going down to Egypt for help, who put their trust in horses, who rely on the quantity of chariots, on great strength of cavalrymen, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or consult Yahweh. Yahweh too is wise and can bring disaster, and he will not go back on his word. He will rise against the breed of evildoers and against those who protect wrongdoers. The Egyptian is human. You trust him like he was a god. not divine. His forces are flesh, not spirit. Yahweh will stretch out his hand. The protector will stumble. The protected will fall. That's you, silly old Judah. And will perish together. Yes, this is what Yahweh said to me, as a lion or a lion cub growls over its prey, when scores of shepherds are summoned to drive it off without being frightened of their shouting or cowed by their noise they make. So when Yahweh descends to fight Mount Zion, he's going to be like that lion, and you can make all your noise, you and Egypt, but nothing will distract Yahweh from his purpose. Like hovering birds, so will Yahweh Sebaoth protect Jerusalem, but he won't protect Judah. And by protecting it, he will save it. By supporting it, he will deliver it. But later on, you'll find that it's going to fall under Babylon. But in the time of Assyria, come back to the ones whom the Israelites have so deeply betrayed. That's like Assyria. For that day, each of you will throw away false gods of silver and false gods of gold, which own sinful man and maid. Assyria will fall by the sword, not that of a man, will be devoured by sword of no human being. He will flee before the sword. His young warriors will be enslaved. Why? Because Yahweh is going to cause Babylon to destroy the nation of Assyria. In his terror, he will abandon his rock. His panic, his officers will desert the standard, declares Yahweh, whose fire is in Zion, whose furnace is in Jerusalem. And then we come to the next section, which is one where translators debate whether this is a future promise or a hypothetical. The former is the, like, behold, there will be a king who reigns uprightly and princes who rule by fair judgment, or you say, suppose there will be a king. And it contrasts with the current rulers in Jerusalem. And remember that from the wisdom literature, fools are those of weak character who lack wisdom and who behave outrageously and stupidly and selfishly. But the scoundrel takes them, or the rascal takes it up to a different level, because this guy really understands he's not as stupid as the fools, but he deliberately chooses evil plans and works them out because he believes God doesn't know. So I'm going to pause there before we come to this magnificent section on Psalm 32, give my voice a rest and give you an opportunity to speak. So I'm stopping sharing. I'm pausing recording.
For a birthday, so.
Okay, not to worry. Well,
it's just been over. Just gave me these.
I will be putting this up on. Enoch should have put it up on the website. So
No, it's all right. If I just suddenly disappear, will you know?
And Graham, you've got a phone call coming around noon, Graham.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, was that from Joe?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The next section is one where translators debate whether this is a future promise or a hypothetical. Okay, I said that. A king who reigns uprightly and princes who rule with fair judgment. Then each one will be like a shelter from the wind, a refuge from the storm, like streams on the ground, on arid ground, like the shade of a solid rock in a desert land. This is a picture of rulers who protect their people rather than fail or exploit them, which is what was happening at this current time when Isaiah was prophesying. The eyes of the seers will no longer be closed. The ears of the hearers will listen or will be on alert. The heart of the hasty will learn to think things over. Isn't that interesting? If you tend to be hasty, the Spirit of the Lord can cause you to think things over. And the tongue of stammerers will speak promptly and clearly. The fool will no longer be called generous, nor the rascal scoundrel be styled bountifully. Remember, the rascal or the scoundrel, this is the guy who understands and he's just choosing to be evil and sneaky and so on. Whereas the fool, he's just speaks folly. His heart set on villainy, utterly selfish, godless in his actions, and his words ascribe error to Yahweh because he gets it wrong. He's stupid. He starves the hungry of their food, refuses drink to the thirsty because he's utterly selfish. But everything to do with the rascal is evil. He devises infamous plans to ruin the poor with lying words, even when the needy has right on his side. But a noble person plans only noble things, and noble is his every move. So this is like the good king, but the fool and the rascal are what they've got. And then it moves on to overconfident women who are lured into a false sense of security. It's not just the men who are stupid, the women are not too good either. And these women, the picture is that everything's going on okay in between all kinds of troubles, and they're happily going along, and he tells them they're going to have a future of mourning, as will the deserted city until the time of the Spirit's outpouring. And so again, you're going to stand up, you haughty, at ease women, listen to my words, you overconfident, complacent daughters, pay attention to what I say. Within 1 year and a few days, this was a prophecy way back then, you will tremble. You're overconfident, complacent women, grape harvesting women, because grape harvesting will be finished. Gathering will never happen again. Shudder, you haughty at ease women. Tremble, you overconfident. Strip, undress, put sackcloth around your waist. Beat your breasts, for these are woe. These are mourning, disaster responses. For the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine, for my people's soil, where bramble bush will be growing. Yeah. And for the happy houses, for the rejoicing sitting, because the palace will be abandoned and the thronged city deserted, Ophel, which could be translated as the place that housed the temple and palace, or just Zion's hilltop. And the keep, Bakhan, will be caves or denuded forever, the playground of wild donkeys and pastures of flocks. It's talking about all this stuff until the Spirit is poured out on us from above, and the desert becomes like an orchard, and the orchard that seems like a forest. Wow. So it's talking about utter disaster until there's going to be a spiritual outpouring of God's presence. Fair judgment will fix its home in the desert, and uprightness will live in this orchard. And the product of uprightness will be peace, and the effect of uprightness being quiet and security forever. My people will live in peaceful homes, in peaceful houses, tranquil dwellings. And should the forest be totally destroyed and the city gravely humiliated, you'll be happy to sow wherever there's water, and let the ox and donkey roam free. And we know there was an outpouring of the Spirit earlier on, but there have been spiritual outpourings along the way in earlier times, partially, but there will be another outpouring of the Spirit at the end when Israel is refined and Israel again is wasted, and there will come a time when Messiah rules, when it's going to be rather marvelous. But back to the woe, which is maybe referring to the Assyrian king, but the betraying part is harder to fit. So a lot of people find it hard. They figure, well, the Syrian was called to destroy, but in terms of betraying, well, that's more like Jerusalem. And so a lot of people have a bit of trouble working this one out. A cry to Yahweh for help in a time when Jerusalem is in trouble and their attempts to sue for peace have been rejected. And they cry out, Yahweh, show us your mercy. We hope in, or we wait for you. Be our arm every morning and our salvation in a time of distress / siege. At the sound of tumult, the peoples flee. When you stand up, the nations scatter, Yahweh. Your spoil is gathered in as a grasshopper gathers in. Like a swarm of locusts, people descend on it. Yahweh is exalted, for he is enthroned above. He has filled Zion with fair judgment and saving justice. You can count on this all your days. Wisdom and knowledge are the riches that save. The fear of Yahweh is his treasure. Yeah, you pray and you hope for the future, but look, Ariel is lamenting in the streets and the ambassadors of peace are weeping bitterly. Yep. The Egypt thing failed, and when you tried to apologize to Assyria, no, that didn't work, and you're going to be belted. Highways are deserted, no traveller anymore on the roads. Agreements broken. Wow. Witnesses are held in contempt. There is respect for no one. The land pines away in mourning, and Israel, Lebanon is withering with shame, and Sharon has become like a wasteland. Bashan and Carmel are shuddering, and Yahweh is going to rise up as a devouring fire. Now I stand up, says Yahweh. Now I shall rise. Now draw myself up. And you plural conceive chaff. You plural give birth to straw. Like fire, my breath spirit will devour you lot, plural. The peoples will burn as though by quicklime. Like cut thorns, they will burn on the fire. You who are far away, listen to what I've done, and you who are near, realize my strength, because Yahweh's commanding far and near to know, and the response is a fearful question. What is the character of those who can survive Yahweh's fire and enter Zion? The sinners in Zion are panic-stricken in their trouble. They're in a siege situation, and fear seizes on the godless. Which of us can survive the devouring fire? Which of us can survive everlasting burning? And you know what the answer is? The one who acts uprightly and speaks honestly, who scorns to get rich by extortion, who rejects his bribes out of hand, who refuses to listen to plans involving bloodshed, and shuts his eyes rather than countenance crime. Such a man will live on the heights. The craggy rocks will be his refuge. He will be fed. He will not want for water. Now, this is interesting. In the Hebrew, the yaw is singular. Is it talking about Jerusalem? Or is it talking about the upright man as a singular and saying your eyes will gaze on the king in his beauty. They will look on a country stretched far and wide. Your heart will meditate on past terrors. Where is the man who did the counting? Where is the man who did the weighing? Where is the man who counted off towers and forts? No more will you singular see that insolent people, the peoples of intelligible speech, of the barbarous and meaningless tongues. The Assyrian sent a judgment, they're gone. You singular must, it's a command here, you singular gaze at Zion, city of our feasts. Your singular eyes will see Jerusalem as a home. So I think this part is the one who acts righteously, that is secure, tent that's not moved. None of its 10 pegs ever to be pulled out. None of its guy ropes ever to be broken. There is that Yahweh shows it's his power, like a place of rivers, very wide, canals on which will row no galley, over which will pass no majestic ship. For Yahweh is our judge, Yahweh is our Lord giver, Yahweh is our King and Saviour. And your feminine singular boat metaphor, tackle is giving way. It cannot support the mast. It cannot hoist the pennon or the flag or the signal. And there is so much booty to be shared out. The lame fall to plundering because there's no fighters against them. It's just so easy. And no one living there will say, I am sickly. The people living there will find their guilt forgiven. This is a wonderful time, a time yet future. And I'm going to open it up for comments as we come to finish. And we're going to do chapter 34 to 38 next Wednesday, God willing. Hallelujah. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop.